You've heard a lot about Toyota, the reliability, the domination, the decades of bulletproof perfection. But there was a time when Toyota was shaken, not by the Germans, not by the Japanese, but by a dying American giant with its back against the wall, Chrysler. Nobody talks about it. Nobody wants to, because this wasn't just a win. It was a moment short, violent, unforgettable when Chrysler didn't just fight back. They embarrassed Toyota. This was the moment when minivans became cool, when the Viper hunted Supras like prey, when the 300C rolled up like a mafia boss in a world full of sleepy sedans, and when Toyota, the king of quiet, couldn't keep up with the noise. They took risks, they broke rules, they got weird, but it worked. This isn't a what-if story. It happened, and the fact you've never heard it, that's the real tragedy. Don't blink, don't scroll, because once this story starts, you'll never look at Chrysler the same again. Toyota was on a roll. Lexus had stunned the luxury world. The Supra Turbo was quietly dominating the streets. Camrys were selling like bottled oxygen. Japan was building perfection, machines that didn't leak, didn't rattle, didn't die. And America? America was bleeding. Chrysler, once a pillar of Detroit steel, was dangling over bankruptcy. The headlines were grim: layoffs, bailouts, closures. But behind the curtains of chaos, something was hissing. A snake. No committees, no focus groups, no compromises. Just raw, violent ambition welded into aluminum and fire. The Dodge Viper. 10 cylinders. No traction control. No ABS. No roof. No forgiveness. It didn't whisper. It roared. A 400 horsepower, red-blooded monster that didn't care what came before it. And when it hit the streets, everything changed. Toyota froze. Their engineers had been obsessing over refinement, shaving milliseconds, polishing curves, perfecting balance. But Chrysler had skipped the rules. They didn't chase perfection. They chased fear. And it worked. The Supra, once the poster child of Japanese muscle, suddenly looked tame. Too quiet, too polite. Because next to the Viper, it wasn't just a car. It was a dare. A dare to every automaker too scared to go unfiltered. To every executive playing it safe. To Toyota, the untouchable giant who just got slapped by a company on life support. And the world watched. Not because they believed Chrysler could win, but because they couldn't believe what Chrysler had just done. And deep inside Toyota's boardrooms, under the silence, behind the smiles, they knew. The snake had struck first. And now, the game was no longer about who built the best. It was about who had the guts to go wild. The Viper wasn't just fast, it was reckless. It wasn't just loud, it was lawless. And that scared Toyota more than anything. Because for the first time in decades, someone broke the unspoken contract of the industry. Play it safe, polish everything, never lose control. But Chrysler didn't care. They were desperate. And desperation is dangerous because it doesn't think in margins. It thinks in revenge. Inside Toyota, the panic didn't show up as screaming. It showed up in silence. Late meetings, longer stares, whiteboards filled with questions no one wanted to answer. What just happened? How did a crumbling American giant out-crazy us? Toyota's crown jewel, the next-gen Supra, was already deep in development. A technological marvel, turbocharged, balanced, reliable. But now, it looked cautious, too civilized, too respectful. And the worst part? The Viper wasn't just stealing attention. It was rewriting expectations. Car magazines couldn't shut up about it. TV ads played it like a rock anthem. And the youth? The youth didn't care about balance anymore. They wanted chaos, drama. They wanted to feel like they were riding a missile, not attending a driving seminar. Toyota wasn't ready for this war. They had built a katana, precision, perfection, control. But Chrysler had shown up with a sledgehammer and people loved it. The Supra team faced a horrifying choice. Do we stick to the plan and risk being forgotten? Or do we burn the blueprints and fight fire with fire? Because the Viper wasn't just a car. It was a declaration. We're not dead yet, and we're coming for blood. And Toyota, for the first time in its quiet, calculated history, had to decide if it was ready to get loud. In 1993, the battlefield was set. The Toyota Supra Mk4 unleashed. The Dodge Viper unhinged. But this wasn't just a showdown between two machines. This was a cultural collision, East versus West, precision versus power, Legacy versus rebellion. The Supra entered like a surgeon, begged BMW for assistance, came out with the legend twin turbocharged, perfect weight distribution, a 2JZ engine so overbuilt it would become a myth years later. It whispered confidence. Every bolt told a story of restraint and excellence. But the Viper? It didn't whisper. It roared in with an 8-liter V10 and zero apologies. No traction control, no ABS, no air conditioning, just fire, fury, and the promise of death if you blinked at 180. And America loved it. The Supra won on paper, faster around tracks, more fuel efficient, more reliable. But the Viper? It won in parking lots, on posters, in teenage bedrooms. It was the car that said, "You don't need to be smart, you just need to be brave." Toyota had built a masterpiece for the disciplined. Chrysler had built a monster for the deranged. And the crowd? They didn't care about dyno sheets or wind tunnels. They cared about what made their heart skip a beat. The Supra, with all its brilliance, was respected. But the Viper was feared. And sometimes, that's more powerful. Toyota had stepped into the arena ready for a duel. But Chrysler had walked in with a Molotov cocktail. And suddenly, the rules didn't matter. Chrysler was back. At least, that's what they told themselves. Because after decades of taking punches from Japan, after the humiliation of being mocked for quality, efficiency, and relevance, they finally had a win. The LH cars were turning heads. The Viper was pure American firepower. The Neon, small, sharp, and cocky, whispered to a new generation that Chrysler could still play in Toyota's backyard and walk out alive. But inside the boardrooms, the champagne wasn't celebration. It was anesthesia. See, when a company like Chrysler bleeds for years, it doesn't recover clean. It scars. And those scars don't remind you to stay humble. They trick you into chasing validation. Suddenly, it wasn't about building great cars. It was about winning headlines, cutting corners, pleasing Wall Street, saving face. The engineers who once fought tooth and nail to beat the Japanese playbook, they were being overruled by men in suits, men chasing stock prices, not street cred. Chrysler didn't just want to compete anymore. They wanted to dominate, fast. So they leaned on flash, big designs, big promises, loud slogans. And under the hood, that quiet desperation to be seen as a savior of Detroit. Meanwhile, Toyota wasn't sleeping. They weren't clapping back on the news. They were busy studying, refining, perfecting, moving silently like they always had. And the gap? It didn't close. It widened. Because while Chrysler was polishing their image, Toyota was polishing engines. While Detroit was celebrating being back, Toyota was preparing their next surgical strike. Lexus, Prius, hybrid tech, unrivaled reliability. The game was shifting again, and Chrysler didn't know it because pride had numbed the pain. They thought the storm had passed. But in reality, they had just stepped into the eye. Wall Street was roaring. Silicon Valley was rising. The world was shrinking fast. And Chrysler? Chrysler thought they'd finally made it. Because after clawing their way back from bankruptcy, out-innovating the doubters, and earning their place at the table again, they weren't just surviving anymore. They were about to merge with Daimler-Benz, a German-American powerhouse, two titans, a so-called merger of equals. That was the headline. But behind the press conferences and photo ops, it wasn't a merger, it was a takeover. Chrysler, the scrappy Detroit brawler, proud and battered, was about to be absorbed by Mercedes-Benz. Their culture, their leadership, their identity, all about to drown under German efficiency and European arrogance. It was sold as a global partnership. But the inside joke at Daimler? We bought ourselves an American discount. And almost overnight, the spirit that once made Chrysler dangerous vanished. The engineers who once stayed late, tweaking fuel injection systems to squeeze out extra miles, replaced. The mad designers behind the Neon and Viper, silenced. Budgets were cut. Autonomy was crushed. Creativity was suffocated under layers of bureaucracy. While Toyota was quietly redefining the 21st century pioneering hybrid technology, perfecting lean production, capturing hearts across the globe, Chrysler was bleeding from the inside. The Neon started slipping in quality. The LH platform stagnated. Even the mighty Viper, America's wildcard, began to feel outdated. It wasn't just cars that were dying. It was momentum. The fire that once made Chrysler feared gone, replaced by press releases, boardroom power plays, and a slow, painful slide back into irrelevance. They thought the Daimler deal would elevate them to Toyota's level. Instead, it buried them alive, while Chrysler tangled itself in mergers, identity crises, and executive reshuffles. Toyota never flinched. They didn't need flashy headlines. They didn't chase hype. They just executed. Quietly, ruthlessly. They were the silent killer creeping forward while the rest of Detroit played checkers. In 2000, the Prius hit US roads. A hybrid? In America, people laughed, said it looked like a jelly bean. But Toyota wasn't playing for now. They were playing for forever. Their factories ran with surgical precision. Their suppliers were trained to the Toyota standard. Their cars? Reliable, efficient, repeatable. One by one, American families stopped buying Dodges, stopped trusting Chryslers, stopped hoping they'd last 200 miles. And instead, they bought Toyotas. Camrys, Corollas, Highlanders, Tacomas. Simple names, silent soldiers. Each one built to last. While Chrysler's lineup turned into a confused mess, part German, part American, part nostalgia, Toyota built an empire of trust. They didn't need neon lights or Super Bowl ads. They let the check engine light, or lack of one, do the talking. And as gas prices rose, as the economy dipped, as the climate conversation heated up, Toyota didn't flinch. They were ready. While Chrysler was still trying to fix the mistakes of the Daimler disaster, Toyota was already in the future selling hybrids, dominating global markets, and investing in hydrogen and electric tech before the buzzwords hit Wall Street. The tables had flipped. The hunter became the hunted. And Chrysler? They didn't even see it coming. This wasn't just a story about car. It was a war of ego versus precision, of noise versus discipline, of American flash versus Japanese patience. Chrysler tried to win with force. Toyota? With focus. And in the end, the scoreboard didn't lie. Today, Toyota sits among the world's most dominant automakers, global, stable, trusted. And Chrysler? A ghost of what it once was, shuffled between owners, bailed out, rebranded, forgotten. This was never about horsepower. It was about endurance. And while Detroit boomed and crashed and boomed again, Toyota just kept moving. So the next time someone tells you the flashy win the race, tell them about Chrysler. Tell them about Toyota. Tell them the quiet ones are the ones you should fear most. Now here's the kicker. If this story lit something inside you, that craving for hidden history, the wars beneath the surface, the truth no one dares to say, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe, drop your thoughts in the comments, and join us next time where we peel back another layer of automotive deception, glory, and downfall. Because this isn't just YouTube. This is where legends rise and fall.